Freaky.
The doctor is in.
Well, it's Pink Table Talk.
Table talk.
These are the conversations that we feel like families should be having all around the country at their kitchen table. And it's just such an important month. It's, March. TNBC Day is coming up March 3rd. And we want to talk about this around every single family's kitchen table. So Haley Dinnerman.
Hi.
So great to see you.
Haley's here with us. Yeah, Haley and I, we kind of developed this program because we wanted to talk to generations. We wanted to talk to 3 generations. We wanted to talk to the mama, the grandma, the auntie, and have, and force these conversations everywhere. But starting at the kitchen table, and we even made our little mugs to.
Our mugs,
and I think that, we model these conversations. I remember growing up, my mother died of ovarian cancer and my grandmother had breast cancer twice. These are the conversations that we didn't have at our kitchen table. Yeah. We didn't know how. We didn't have the language to have these conversations. And so really our hope is that from this show, we would model the types of conversations that families can have and the power of their stories. And, Haley, I know this one is near and dear to your heart today.
Yeah, we have a great family. Go, Haley, introduce our awesome family.
Such a wonderful family. So I first met Allison. Allison, you reached out to me a few months ago, and your story just really resonated with me. You spoke so beautifully about your mother, Marla, who unfortunately, sadly passed away of triple negative breast cancer in August, I believe. And, we had a lot to talk about when you first called. And I know that you spoke about how much Marla wanted to be an advocate, how she found the TNBC Foundation, and she wanted everyone to know that triple negative breast cancer was unlike other forms of breast cancer. She just was so passionate about getting that information out there. And the more we spoke about it, the more I realized that your family would be so incredibly perfect for our Pink Table Talk concept, because truly everything that you said showed us that, your family is close. And yet there were still conversations that weren't had maybe at the right time. And that's something that we can all learn from, because I think these are difficult conversations. So Allison, I'm so happy to see you here at the Pink Table. I am so thrilled to have Lori here as well. Lori, say hello.
I'm so great to be here.
And Marcia as well. We have 3 generations here.
Yay, 3 generations.
And it's incredible. This is exactly what our program was designed to do, to have these real intimate conversations, originally envisioned live around a kitchen table. And we hope to get back to that format one day. But for now, this is the way we're doing it. And we're really excited to have you here at the Pink Table.
Thank you.
We're so excited.
Like there's some chocolate on the table, a pink tablecloth, and this is beautiful tea that we're drinking, but
fresh baked goods, right?
Cheers. Yeah. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Yes, cheers. Well, cheers to Marla. And
Marla.
Cheers to Mom.
Cheers to Mom.
Cheers to Mom. So, you know what, you guys, tell us your story. We love to hear your story. I don't know who wants to go first.
I think she's been the advocate to bring us here through her mother.
Okay. So,
but it all started with the original, who you have sitting by you, Grandma Marcia. So maybe it makes sense to start there, because Grandma has, so much.
I am the oldest.
Yeah, and you knew her the longest, right?
Yeah. Call that the MVP mom.
Right, the MVP mom.
Yeah,
super and mom. You had breast cancer first.
In 1969.
Wow. So what was it like then? How old were you then?
Well, people say to me today, I see on your charts when I'm at the doctor's office, how come you've never had a mammogram? Is there something you don't want to have? Is that something you don't want to have? And I said, well, first of all, I had breast cancer in 1969. they didn't have a mammogram machine then. So I happened to be in bed one night and I got a pain in my chest right here. And my mother was visiting and she was laying next to me in bed. And she said, "What are you doing?" "Nothing." We never talked about cancer. We never mentioned the word cancer. It was, did you hear? You whispered it. C. The C. And if you didn't know what the C was, then you were out of luck. You missed the whole conversation.
Wow.
I finally had to tell her I discovered a lump. Well, my mother panicked. She jumped out of bed and went, "Oh my God, where is it?" I said, "Right here." And I said, she says, "Let me feel it." I said, "You won't find it," because I had a hard time bringing it up. I finally found it and I took her hand and I put it on there and she felt it and she went, "Oh my God, what are you going to do? I said, "Well, it's almost midnight. I can't call a doctor. I'll call first thing in the morning." You better. I said, "I will." First thing in the morning, I got on the phone and I called my doctor's office, my primary care. And I said, "Do I get to talk to Dr. Siegel, or do you want me to just relay it to you and you'll tell him?" I said, "I found a lump." "You found it?" I said, "Yes." "Well, how did you know to look for it?" I said, "I didn't." I said, "I had a sharp pain. Could have been gas, I don't know what, but I felt, and I kept circling the area and I finally found it. And I'm calling because I think Dr. Siegel should look at this." She said, "You think?" I'll tell you what, I open at 9. The 9 o'clock will wait. I want to see you first. I said, "Okay." I was exactly 8 minutes away from the doctor's office. And I got there in 4, I think. And I went on the table and he couldn't find it. I said, "Give me your hand." And I found where it was and he felt it. And he said, "Okay, I want you to see a surgeon today. Let me call Dr. Essick and find out if he'll see you." As I said, "Well, wait a minute. I've got 3 children at home. And you know that. And let me get somebody there to watch them first," which I did. I called a neighbor. She went and sat with her 2 children. And I went to the surgeon and he couldn't find it either. And I found it for him. He said, "You do good work." And I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to try and aspirate it right here. I said, "Now, when I'm awake?" He said, "Yes." I said, "You know, I'm a devout coward." He said, "That's okay. I won't hurt you, I promise." And he couldn't get anything fluid out of it. He said, "One good thing is cancer does not hurt." I said, "Well, this hurts." And he said, "I won't know until we can get in there." He said, "But we have a problem. I'm going to call the hospital right now and get this quickest date I can to get you on a table so I can see what it is. I will have somebody from the lab right then and there, and he will do a biopsy. Now, I said, okay. He said, so we're going to work it this way, Marcia. If you wake up and you're in this room, you know it was nothing. If you wake up in another room, then we're in trouble. I said, okay. Meanwhile, I'm being very stoic about the whole thing because I think I was numb. And again, I'll reiterate, we never spoke of cancer. Never. It was an unknown word.
I'm going to interject and say it was more of a dirty word.
Yes,
Nobody
it
spoke
was.
of cancer. And when people in the community found out that Marcia had breast cancer, it was almost like she was an outcast. She was,
Wow.
it was like contagious almost.
Well, they really didn't know.
And just tell, yes.
Anyway, he called the hospital, and because they were in the midst of heavy duty redecorating, they had all the rooms torn up, and we couldn't get me into an operating room to do a biopsy until, well, I can tell you, it was 3 weeks. And I said, well, now what? Can't we go someplace else to another hospital? He said, I don't have privileges at another hospital. We can get you another doctor at another. I said, no, I don't. I want you to do it. Well, he said, it isn't fast growing, your type of cancer. And you can wait. You'll have to wait.
And you waited, and it was 3 weeks.
And I called my father, who lived in Florida, and I said, can I come for a vacation? He said, you don't have to ask, of course. What about the kids? I said, I'll get a sitter. And he said, of course, just let me know what plane and what day, and I'll be there. Okay, fine. I went to Florida. I lost 9 pounds in 10 days.
How old were you then, Marcia? How old were you then?
I was in my 30s.
You were a baby.
6.
Wow.
Wow.
Well,
You were 34, right, Grandma?
I thought 34. You always said 36.
well, we'll figure it out. 1969, and I was born in 1934.
Get my calculator.
35. Who's the scientist? Where's the calculator?
Not it. While we do that math, though, there's like so much to unpack here.
I
You know,
know.
mammograms were invented-ish in the late 1950s, but the first article didn't come out until like maybe 1959, and the first book on mammograms 1964, and the first clinical trials 1966-ish. And so it's not like these things were even available. I mean, you'd go in for one thing and you could potentially come out without a breast, right? You wake up and that was the surgery, and it was so hush. It was, you're right, Lori. It was a word that you didn't say. You whispered it. You didn't talk about it. Somebody went away on vacation and they came back and your clothes looked a little bit different, and it really wasn't a sort of kitchen table conversation at all. And to face all of this at 34 with children is just, it shows an incredible strength. I mean, even today, young women aren't supposed to get breast cancer, right? They're not even of age to get the screening mammograms. And there's just so much here to really unpack, and how it impacted subsequent generations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing is, after the fact, and Marcia, can tell her story, but I believe it was 6 months later, you went in for your other breast.
4 months later.
They took one breast, and then you found another lump, or what happened?
There was no option. Do you want to have the second one because of spreading, or maybe we should do the second one as long as you were on the table? They never asked me, and I would have done whatever the doctor said, I think. Anyway,
Wow.
4 months later, I was being installed as a vice president of a big organization. I did a lot of volunteer work. I never, ever thought about death. I didn't think about death. I mean, I just didn't. I was going to survive. I guess because I'm very strong.
And may I ask, what did the family know, and when did the rest of the family come to know that you had breast cancer and that they might have risk and maybe need to be checked out by their doctors?
Never, ever, ever, ever discussed it with the rest of the family.
Really? Wow.
We discussed it as a family. My parents, Marcia was divorced from my father, who lived in Columbus. We lived in Cincinnati, and he came down to tell us. But really, so many years later of, that finding out that perhaps it's genetic, finding out that, we should have mammograms at an early age. And our family, that is quite open, started discussing and kind of figuring out patterns. Like my mom's father's sister had breast cancer.
His mother also had cancer.
And so all these
Breast
little
cancer.
links started happening, where we became aware of it as a family, that, as soon as, I believe it was like 40 at the time, that you could start having mammograms, when, it was at your family history that we started having mammograms regularly, including, my sister Allison's mother, Marcia's daughter, Marla. So it's not like we, we're in, like, not taking care of ourselves. Every year I had a mammogram, every year. And so did Marla.
So when did
high risk wasn't a thing back then, like it wasn't, we didn't understand what risk meant. I mean, you could have an entire family full of people with cancer, and nobody would really say, well, you need to start 10 years younger, or maybe you should get ultrasounds or MRIs or other things. That concept really didn't evolve. I mean, we didn't know what BRCA was until 1993, 94, really 95. So so much that we didn't.
I mean, so it was like, it really wasn't until, I must say, probably, 15, 20 years, maybe 15 years ago, people, when they saw my family history, I was asked about testing, and I really didn't want to do it. I was like, I don't want to know this. Like, what would change in my world if I found out I had it? Would I have, breast surgery? And I was like, the hippie side of me, it was like, I would not do that. Yeah, it wasn't until Marla got triple negative that we all were tested. Which
really? Wow. So when you really didn't get tested until your sister got sick.
Like 3 years ago, we got tested.
Wow. Wow. So what made you think it was hereditary? Just because you had your dad's sister, or
I thought it was hereditary.
you did think it was, or
I didn't think.
you didn't
I
think it was?
mean, after hearing it, not back when Marcia had it, but just being aware of our situation and doctors saying it's hereditary. And
Right.
every time I certainly told my family history,
I don't think they said it is hereditary. It could be hereditary.
Okay. Because they probably didn't know, right? Mo, you're saying BRCA didn't come out until the 90s, right? They didn't know.
It's true. We didn't know, and there were only a small number of people who really could get tested. And then we learned that Ashkenazi Jewish individuals had a higher risk too, and that came into play, and it kind of blew the lid off of everything. I'd like to hear more about Marla's story, though. Allison, would you like to share where she enters the family tree and her journey a little bit?
Sure. So my mother, Marla, was originally diagnosed in 2017, late in the year, and she has had other health issues, and she actually ended up in the hospital for some stomach issue. And it was there in the hospital where they said, run, don't walk, to get your next mammogram. And my mom, as my aunt pointed out, she was always adamant about her mammograms. I mean, she was always on routine. She was wearing the pink ribbons and supporting breast cancer and breast cancer health way before all of this. I mean, she was like, come on, we're doing the Susan G. Komen walk. I mean, she had every one of those shirts from every year, I promise you. And so this was actually sort of a surprise, her diagnosis, because she was so routine with her mammogram. And so she definitely did not find it herself. And I don't know the story of how the doctors actually found it, or if something like came up in a blood work test or something. They just made her go get the mammogram. And then, it was from there, that meeting with her breast surgeon. Her name was Dr. Christine Slam. You may have heard her. She's in Columbus, Ohio. That's where we learned that it was triple negative. And we, like so many people, the whole shock of everything breast cancer is you think breast cancer is just breast cancer. Right. And then you're like, well, wait, there's 3 hormones that respond by treatment, and my mom has no hormones that will respond, so therefore it's triple negative. And so then you start to learn, you peel back the onion of like, no, not all breast cancer is the same. And then as you're starting to peel back, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, if you're going to get breast cancer, this is the worst breast cancer. Because the most, like, I know everybody meant well through her diagnosis, but it sort of was like, no, you don't really understand. Because when people would say to you like, oh, there's so many treatments, it's not a death sentence anymore. And, and in triple negative's case, it's a different story.
Dr. Google didn't say that for triple negative, right?
I think that's one of the reasons, Allison, that, what the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation does every March with our Triple Negative Breast Cancer Awareness Campaign is so important. Right. I feel like your mom would love it. I feel like she would be one of our champions in March. But that's the whole point. It's to really educate people that A, breast cancer is not just one disease, and B, there is, it's the medical landscape is different for a triple negative patient.
Lori, you want to say something?
I wanted to just interject because Marla's the oldest daughter, who was 18 months older than me, and I have a sister who's 3 years younger than me. And when she was 34 years old, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had her breast removed, and they did the funnel from the stomach. So she has both breasts. And for 20 years, she was cancer free. And 2 summers ago, they found a lump in her other breast. Stage 1, so, radiation. But when Marla got cancer, all of us were tested, and only Marla and my mom have the BRCA gene. Now, Marla has the triple negative. We're not 100% sure right now if Marcia has the triple negative. But Vicky tested negative for BRCA, and I'm sure triple negative because they checked for that. So everyone's sort of like, she's a mystery. You know, when they hear BRCA or triple negative, it's like, oh, right, doctor, but it's like for her, everyone's always astounded by, like, you know, what is that besides the 1 in 8 of us get it regardless.
Wow.
It's true, you know, and it brings up a really good point, genetic versus hereditary. You know, I tell patients all the time that all cancer is genetic in the sense that it's like that episode of I Love Lucy where she and Ethel work in a chocolate factory. You know, the one where the machine goes haywire and the chocolates, love it. Favorite episode, right? They're coming off the belt faster and faster, and they're stuffing them in their pockets, and the machine's gone wild in their hat. I mean, everywhere. That's cancer. But not all the factory mistakes get passed down generation after generation. That's heredity, you know, and 1 in 8 of us will get breast cancer. But in this country, 1 in maybe 500 will have a mutation in the gene that predisposes you or puts you at higher risk for the development of cancer. And then triple negative is a whole other thing that we throw on there. And, you know, I tell patients, it's like, instead of taking the tolls on the PA Turnpike, it's like you're in the easy pass lane, right? You're not using dollars, so we can't take away your dollars. So there's no single determined treatment. Like, this is the thing that's going to fix or cure or treat your cancer. We throw everything at it because we don't know what's causing it, unfortunately. So it's
triple negative are different.
Again?
And BRCA and triple negative are different.
Yeah, BRCA is the gene, and everybody has that gene. It's a gatekeeper. It's the spell checker. It's whether or not your spell checker has some changes somewhere along the line that makes it miss some of the typographical errors that come out of the cells. And triple negative is what's happening on those cancer cells. So it's not a gene that you can pass down. It's a type of cancer that people with BRCA mutations tend to get more often than others.
Yeah, like I had triple negative, but I don't have any genetic mutations.
Yeah.
It's so complicated.
So complicated. Well, I think also we see that there's more BRCA with Ashkenazi Jewish women.
1 in 75. You know, 1 in 75. And
it also affects ovaries, right? Tumor.
It does. It's a hereditary breast and ovarian cancer syndrome. And you're talking breast, you know, ovarian cancer. And this is why we have these conversations. When you hear this, like, nobody told me my mom died of ovarian cancer, which is less than 1% of the population. It's rare, but it's a red flag for things like BRCA mutations, you know, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, melanomas, male breast cancer. So there's a whole host of cancers that this gene is a gatekeeper for. And if the gatekeeper, you know, has some changes in it, it's letting through some cells that make mistakes. And all it takes is 1 makes 2 makes 4 makes a million. And then you've got a cancer.
And when you're tested for it, what's the percentage of those tests that are correct? I mean, if we tested negative, does that necessarily mean we're really negative? Like, what's that percentage?
Like COVID, you mean?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yeah, because the quality and the fidelity of COVID testing was really kind of lousy at first. And I suspect for the BRCA genes as well, because what we learned was that, you know, genes are like a ladder. And if this is all the rungs that we know, and now we know the ladder is this long, and now we know the ladder is this long, and now we've learned the ladder is this long. And so it's why we offer things like, we call it update testing. So every 10 or 12 to 15 years, I talk to my patients. If you got tested back in 2000, we're in 2021. Maybe we should consider testing you again because we know more information now about these genes. And we know it's more than just the BRCA genes as well. There's a whole lot of other genes that are also gatekeepers that we can test for now for hereditary cancer. So the landscape's changing so quickly, you know, the science is, but whether or not people understand that, I mean, how many folks weren't even offered testing and they had breast cancer in the 60s and the 70s, and no doctor ever said, you know, you might meet criteria. We didn't know what triple negative was back then, right? But now all women with triple negative meet criteria for that testing.
Right. No, I had to test in 2011 when I was sick, and then I had it again 2 years ago, and it was a totally different test. But now we're finding, even for Black women, that there's testing done. There's some testing done in Africa where they're seeing some genetic mutations with Black women with triple negative, but we don't have the science yet. So
No, honestly, Ricky, we just published the paper that validated the testing even works on people of different ancestries, because
Yeah.
all the testing in this publications were on people of Eastern European descent. So we're learning a lot. Marcia, you wanted to say something.
Yes. Marla used to say, I just read, I just heard, I just talked. And I said, what did you hear? She said, you had triple negative breast cancer.
Mm.
I said, who? She said, you. I said, no, I did not. My doctor was a very well-known oncologist. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Harry Horowitz. Jewish Hospital brought him over from England because he had just discovered and finalized a new chemotherapy.
What year was this, Mom?
1969.
Wow, they had chemo.
And he said to me, I've got lots of tricks up my sleeve. He said, you'll come in next week, and my first thing I'm going to do is start you on a little dose of chemo. And I said, oh, I've heard bad things about chemo. He said, if you can't tolerate it, I'll stop it. I said, okay, I'm in your hands. And he said, thank you, we're going to get along just fine. I went back the next week. And by the way, my mother was still with me. She wouldn't leave. She was more nervous than I was. I didn't really want her around. I mean, come on, I was a young mother going through a divorce with 3 children at that time. No, I didn't have 4.
He
Eric
was born in 1966. He's 10 years younger than me. Good for.
Oh,
You were going through your second divorce. But who's counting?
It's okay.
you were.
They're lost. They're lost.
That's right.
Ricky, what do you always say? Get rid of the husbands and get rid of the other cancers in your life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, those are cancers that gotta go, man. I have a husband.
Children.
You know, this reminds me though of Haley. Haley, I think every time we talk and say, well, you know, I read something new, I learned something new, here's something that's interesting. And you send interesting articles and facts our way. I mean, it's a never ending search for knowledge and understanding, isn't it?
It is.
I
It
asked.
really is.
One of
It is, but it's so, it's so interesting to me that, families that are so close and talk about almost everything. I hear it so often from so many women that, cancer is just something that they didn't talk about. And knowing, as Ricky calls it, her story, right? Knowing your background, Dr. Mo, like, how can that help someone viewing right now, someone watching this Pink Table Talk? Why is it important to have these conversations? How can it affect things?
You know,
it really is. Ooh,
absolutely. Go right ahead, please.
I thought it was the dog.
Go on, doctor. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think it's more powerful coming from Marcia even about why these stories have power. One, because cancer is not just one disease, right? And we used to think, oh, cancer is the C and it's everything. It's the same thing. It just happens in different places, and that's not true. And when we find that there's a family history that's strong and that it happens early in life, we're at higher risk and our offspring are at higher risk. And so knowing her story helps us to know, one, what you're at risk for, which cancers.
Mhm.
Two, how much screening you should get. And, my sister didn't want to get BRCA testing either. I got it when I was finishing. I was a chief resident in Massachusetts. And I said, well, I'm going to be a breast surgeon soon. I can't possibly talk to women about breast cancer and hereditary risk if I don't do this testing. And so I did the testing, and she said, nope, I don't want to know. If the train's coming, I don't want to see it. And so, it's so different, the responses in families, but it helps us to know if you're at higher risk and if you should get more screening. And, maybe there's some things that we can begin to work on, even as far as the therapies now. We know that certain women with triple negative breast cancer and women who have BRCA mutations and triple negative breast cancer respond better to some drugs even.
Right.
So the implications for even drug therapy are different now.
Yeah, even though with my sister, I talk to my sister at least twice a year, please cut your boobs off. She's 4 years younger than me, but because we just don't know. I mean, even though I don't have BRCA, I could have something that could affect her. And, it's like an ongoing conversation between the two of us, because I wish that she would just take the precaution, you know what I mean? And I think that's one thing that people struggle with, that when you do have the gene or have a genetic mutation, people struggle with, what do I really do with this information? Like you just said, your sister didn't want to know. Well, I know for me, I wish I had had a choice. Do you know what I mean? And I think that I wish I could have acted prophylactically. I didn't have a choice. Neither did your mom, Allison. She didn't have a choice. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So how do you know, like, how do you make that decision that I can do something to prevent this?
Mm-hmm.
Or not? How much knowledge does it take, or should you? Or, and it's really a tough decision for a lot of women to say, I don't want to know at all. And then when I do know, what am I really going to do about it?
Exactly. And do you feel like in today's world, like you go to the doctor and they're all aware of all of these different types of breast cancer, like, or could they miss something, or?
Yeah.
In 2022 year of our Lord, women are being turned away for palpable lumps without imaging. And they're being told, oh, it's probably a cyst. And, Marsha, what makes your story so impressive to me is that your doctor took you seriously and didn't say, oh, you're 30 something, you don't have a breast cancer. It's just fibrocystic disease. It's just your hormones and your period, because that's what's happening to a lot of women. And so we've actually gone back. We've taken some steps back in that regard, especially as it relates to young women. But for the technology side of things and the science, it's moving faster than we can know what to do with. We can test for 80 different gene mutations, but we only know what to do for about maybe 40 of them or less. Mm-hmm. So we're getting all this information and we still don't know how to inform women better, because, do you do it prophylactically? Do you wait until you have atypical cells? Do you get screening twice a year? And there's no one size fits all, because I got patients who decide all the things.
And this is a whole other conversation, but does insurance cover all of this? I know that's a lot of.
Yeah, it does. It should.
It does now.
It does now.
It didn't back in 94, 95.
When I was sick, my doctor had to fight for it for me. But in 2011, but now it's covered. But I have a question too. Yeah, I have a question about Marla. Did your mom, Allison, did she have the gene? Was she tested for it? So
when she was diagnosed in late 2017 and we found out it was triple negative, they encouraged the genetic testing. And through the panel of the testing, the family tested, and the positive BRCA1 was my grandmother and my mother. And for me, I was so like, oh my gosh, like, I've never been attached to my breasts, and maybe partially because, growing up and seeing my grandmother and, my grandma's beautiful, and it's like, you don't need your breasts.
Right.
And
right.
I always have felt like, just go ahead and let's do something prophylactically. But because I don't have the gene, the doctors, at least in the state of Ohio, it's considered radical surgery. Wow. I have to pay for it myself. And, and it's something that really doesn't sit well with me, because I feel like that should be my choice and my decision. And because we have such a I get knocked back into like the general population because I don't have the gene.
Wow. I
And
know. I
this
hear
is
you.
tricky,
I would
though.
want it. I would want to do it too.
It's tricky because we know that having a mutation puts your lifetime risk for breast cancer upwards of 80%, right? 85, 86% in your lifetime. But if you don't have the mutation, they're saying, well, maybe your risk is average, but it doesn't factor in your family history. And I think that that's the conversation you got to have. Just because you don't have a mutation, you're not at the highest risk, but you're still not at average risk, right? You're still above average. You're still higher risk. And I think that, that's the calculation that's missing from this. And you should be able to have that option, if you so chose. And so I think we've got some work to do there for a lot of women who are just like you with strong family histories and no mutation. What are they to do? And the answer is that sometimes we can really involve a lot of phone calls and angry. I close my door and write angry letters and I start taking names with the insurance companies. And who are you? It hasn't seen my patient. And you start writing down the names, right? And then they get off the phone really quickly. But that's the type of advocacy we have to do for these patients. And it's just not right.
Not right. Yeah. Yep. So
I said to Allison today, because I got my testing through Mount Sinai in New York. And they are amazing. I mean, literally at least once a month, they're sending me updates and so positive, oh, we have new information. Like they're really proactive. And I never, ever look at them. And in hearing you, and I feel just when you said that, doctor, about, oh, it's this wide and this long now. And you can tell that it's grown so much since I even had it.
right. For sure.
In today, as we're having this, and I sent it to Allison, and I feel like I'm ready to have another panel, because I think just like having mammograms every year and having your MRIs, that the encouragement, and I'd love to say this here because I think it's so important, we feel we've never been told oh, it's kind of like once you've had, your test, you're done. And that's not what you're saying, and that's not what I've been feeling, and that's not what Mount Sinai. They get so excited when they discover something new. So I think it's important to encourage women also to continue and get this panel done.
It's not a one and done.
Haley, that's the beauty of this pink table talk. There it is. You asked about the importance of this, and there it is. Because for people who are watching who are saying, you know what, I can't afford that. Well, guess what? The companies now have gotten it down to the point where it's $249 is probably the most you'll pay if your insurance won't cover it, right? And then they even have financial assistance plans for that. So this is doable. This is $10 a month, payment plan-ish to get a whole lot of information that can help not just you, but help your children and your family. Because, I can tell you, for every woman that I diagnose, the next question that she has, she wants to know, am I going to die? Am I going to need chemo? What should I be eating? And then what about my kids? Is there some test that I should be doing?
My kid. Yeah. So we didn't hear a lot of your mom's whole story. We kind of cut you off, Al.
Oh, her story, diagnosed in 2017, she was given so much chemo, they threw everything in the kitchen sink at her. Her little body just...
What stage was she?
It was stage 1, and it was a successful surgery. It had spread, stage 1 at diagnosis, and then at surgery, they discovered it was stage 2 because it did spread into a couple lymph nodes. And they wanted her to do chemo, which we were like, no, but we got her there, and she could only they ordered 20 weeks and she could only do a week, and landed back in the ICU. And so we decided, the doctor was like, she ethically cannot give my mother any more chemo. So my mom, we thought, honest to God, she was cured, because she was doing so well. She would go for her scans, and then, and again, her surgery was in January 2018, and then late October of 2020, right, with COVID and everything else, it came up again because she was in the hospital for something else, and somebody threw from an x-ray found a little like pebble right hovering over her heart area. And they were like, no, this doesn't look right. And so it was even to get the biopsy was a big deal because of the location of it. It was just right over the heart. So we had to go to a thoracic surgeon. And this was an awful time to have a recurrence because of COVID and, you know, not even being able, like I'm sitting in the car while my mom's up there by herself and like the masks and everything. It was just awful. And, you know, we were all on the phone on our FaceTimes. Thank goodness for FaceTime. But yeah, they discovered that it was in fact a recurrence, and she had like a 9-hour surgery, December 12th of 2020. We had an amazing thoracic surgeon, and they took everything to the margin, but it was just right over there. They had to remove ribs. And then they wanted her to do a radiation. I think it was like 25 weeks of radiation. They just hit it heavy, like all that chest one. She did it, and and she rang that bell, and she's doing so good. And it was like, she looked great. And then she went for a sister weekend with my Aunt Lori in Berwyn, Pennsylvania. And they went and had a Memorial Weekend. And they had lots of conversations, right, Aunt Lori, where she was.
Well, she came, which is huge for her because Marla's had a lot of issues like throughout her life. And it being addiction and just the body was, you know, exhausted and frail. But, you know, she got on that plane and she was so excited. And that first night we had such a great night. And literally the next day, as she was coming down the steps, she was like, I feel this pain. And it was like, what she was describing was sort of like sciatica, and she had never had that. And so it just really sounded, but as the 4 days went along, it just got worse and worse. And, you know, Marla has always had pain. It's kind of been our thing growing up where Marla's not well. So, you know, there's a lot of family history in Marla. But I could really see that she was bad, and she went home and it was killing her for like a couple weeks, to the point where the doctor said to her, you need to go for pain management. You need to go to the ER. And that's when she went to the ER, and she really never came out of the hospital after that. It just, the testing, which, you know, it's a teaching hospital, Ohio State. So they just wanted to keep going with every test they could, you know, and it was almost too much for her. And, you know, we're a good family of getting information out of doctors. And finally, somebody was honest with us and basically told us it had spread through her body, and it was a matter of time. And that was, you know, so she came to me Memorial Weekend, which was June. And by the middle of July, she was in the hospital and then passed away in August. So at the end, it was rapid, and she had a good, 2 years of, you know, 3-month testing, cancer-free or cancer-free, and, you know, hope.
Totally came out of nowhere. Really, the recurrence in December, where the thoracic surgeon removed the recurrence there, and then the radiation, she did so well. And then literally it was like this pain down her leg, and it just literally came like overnight, which was crazy. And they didn't want to do scans. Because she had just come off of the radiation treatment, and they said, it's a little too soon. And then finally I was like, we're taking you to the emergency room, because like I sat and I was like, and then she wasn't eating, like her behavior was changing. And that was something that was unique to me. And trust me, like I'm the daughter, right? So like, of course my mom's always going to be a nut, but I was like, no, something is just like not right. And I just made and it's just like things were,
I love that we're having this part of the conversation, right? Because the body does keep score. It's a great book called The Body Keeps Score. And so when we have, chronic illness, depression, when we have, trauma in our life, when we have stress, it happens in our bodies too. And it results in aches and pains and those sorts of things that always are there. But the difference between that and between cancer is that point tenderness, that not going away. Something is different. I can't get comfortable. This isn't like my general aches or my fibromyalgia or the migraines that I get. This is something different. And it's so important to listen to your body and have family members that listen and can recognize that even in the midst of, what might be chronic pain and other issues for you, something is different here. And I think that's a really good pink table talk point.
Yes, because she knew and we knew and we knew. And Marla's always had everything you just said times 1,000. And we knew this was different. And she knew this was different. And it was very good. And I want to just say the beauty, get back to a little, joy is during all of this. Is when she really did her homework and found Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation and just loved it. And every morning she would send us like a quote from there. And it really was it was so much strength for her and joy. And again, a sense of community, knowing you're not alone. And she was it's almost like, it gave her a sense of pride to be part of a community, even though it was the worst thing that could ever be. And so I just want to, shout out to that because it really did. She loved it so much. And, if you knew Marla, if she had a cause, you would hear about it. She might have a whole bracelet, necklace, clothes, everything, a part of that. And it was really a miracle that, she found this, as she finds everything. And it just gave her that strength. So, we're always going to be here and be grateful for that because, she just was just an advocate for everything that was important and,
And at the end, and Grandma, you might remember this too, when her oncologist came in and he was ready to give her, I think this was day, I don't know, maybe 15 of her being in the hospital, because she was in the hospital for 18 days, which blew my mind because that was a long time. And, but at one point when her oncologist came for a visit, and it was late in the day, I think it was like 6 o'clock, and we waited for him, and he had suggested another trial for her. And I'm looking at him like he has 6 heads, because I was like, how are you going to do a trial on her? But do you remember what Mom said, Grandma, in the hospital bed? Because she was like, I will do whatever. I'm going to stand and I'm going to say, we beat this. We beat this. Didn't she? Do you remember?
Love that. You have to have that energy. But
She fought like a girl, right?
she felt like a girl. I appreciate what you said about the TNBC Foundation, and really, I mean, when I was sick, I couldn't find a doctor that could help me. And my doctor gave me 2 years to live. And I called Haley and I need a doctor, and that saved my life. And so I think that, Haley's worked so hard and so diligently to make the TNBC Foundation a haven, a home for our disease. And we say no one fights alone. And, we do, it's a different disease that we have. We fight a different fight. I say that all the time. The fact that we don't have a drug to prevent recurrence, we're the only breast cancer that doesn't have a drug to prevent recurrence. And now we still only have one therapy targeted to us for early stage and 2 for metastatic. And so we don't have the science that we deserve as patients. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is trying to advance that science. And so all the money that we raise with the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation goes into science. And I think that's really our purpose for TNBC Day. And, that's why, we work so hard. I mean, Haley's great idea to even establish TNBC Day, but it's really about raising money to change the game on how we think about this disease and how we treat this disease. And so we really need to advance the science. And, you know, Black women get triple negative at 3 times the rate of white women. And I don't think we have a number for women of Ashkenazi Jewish descent, but I think it's either that or higher. And so we need more science. And so, you know, we all are, that's what we're here for. So not only is it a conversation for our families and how our families are dealing with it, but also how can we help other families to not have to deal with it. So
Marsha, you wanted to say something?
Yes, this is very important. Again, if you find a doctor that will help you, if you find a doctor that's knowledgeable with triple negative, I just have to say one thing, and I think, Haley, I asked you this question when we first met. Did this group have anything to do whatsoever with March the 3rd, 3 years ago this March?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So we, the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation established Triple Negative Breast Cancer Awareness Day. And over the years, it's grown into really a national movement to raise awareness and funds for research. So as Ricky was saying before, all the funds that are raised by individuals in the month of March goes to research specific to triple negative breast cancer. And we're really, we're really proud of that because that's where it needs to be. But, you know, you were talking and you did mention to me when we first spoke about March 3rd a few years ago and the walk. And yes, there are so many different events, especially before COVID, on the ground where people did do walks all over the country to celebrate Triple Negative Breast Cancer Awareness Day and raise awareness for the disease.
Haley's being humble. This was her brainchild in 2013.
No, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't just me. Our foundation, I mean, that's one thing that's so incredible about our organization. We have this super involved board of directors. We have a phenomenal group of volunteers and people who were helped by the foundation who didn't just turn away when they were done with treatment, but came back to help other women that are newly diagnosed. And it's made, it's made such a difference, and it's enabled us to grow and do so much more than, our small size, right, suggests.
Okay, but I just want to say, Doctor, you said you've heard of Dr. Horowitz, Harry Horowitz?
Yes. I'm actually looking at a 1973 publication, March 1973. I had to dig for this article called Whole Body and Partial Body Radiotherapy of Advanced Cancer out of Cincinnati, Ohio, from Dr. Harry Horowitz. Yes.
He's my doctor. And he told me he was going to start me on a little chemo. And I said, I've heard terrible things about chemo. I said, we're going to start. We'll try it. If it doesn't work and you cannot tolerate it, okay. He headed up a team with Jewish Hospital in Cincinnati, the University of Kentucky, the University of Tennessee, and one other one. I can't remember what that one was. And he told me, prepare. You'll come to the office next Wednesday. I will start you on a little chemo, and we'll see what happens from that. And then we can document it, and we will try everything. I said, you're going to let me die? He said, not on my watch.
Not on my watch. I knew it.
You did say that. I remember.
I knew it.
Not on my watch. I love it. That's
my answer. That's my answer.
Not on my watch.
Wednesday, I got all undressed, and at that time, which was the scariest thing I had ever seen, the chemo radiation was all done in the basement at Jewish Hospital. And the machines were up above and they were huge. I said, oh my God, this is so scary. He said, you're going to sit in that chair. You're not in under a machine. And I'm going to start you on this. But would you be upset if I told you we're not going to do it? And I looked at him and I said, but you said you're not going to let me die. And he said, I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry.
Hey.
Okay. It's okay, babe.
He said, I'm sorry. I'm not going to let you die. But you know, I head up a team. And we've gone over your every day. This past week, we've had a conference call. The 5 of us. I don't feel you're a candidate for chemotherapy. And I said, like I said, you're going to let me die. He said, again, no, I'm not on my watch. Next week, you'll come in. I'm telling you, we'll start a little radiation, just a little bit. And he went, just a little bit. And let's see what happens. I said, okay. Again, I went back the following Wednesday. I prepared. I was in a gown. Went down to the laboratory because that's what that was.
That's right. In
Yeah.
the basement.
Basement, yeah.
And he said, when he came in, he said, did the nurse tell you? I said, what? We're not going to start a little radiation. Again, we've had this discussion. I said, why have you done this with me? He said, I do it with all my patients.
There it is.
I said, okay. What's the next step we are going to talk about? And I'm going to not sleep or eat this week. And he said, I want you to sleep and I want you to eat. We're not going to do a goddamn thing. And
Love it.
And I said, then I know you're going to let me die. He said, I promise you.
He was good.
Really, you know, the art of medicine, right, is knowing when not to do something. Because we're surgeons, we can operate on, you know, we're a hammer looking for a nail, right? And I always tell my patients, like the science says one thing, but the art says, is this the right thing for the right person at the right time and at the right stage? And I could sit and listen to you tell this story forever because one, it highlights how things used to be from the scientific standpoint and how far we've come. Like, I think people need to know how far science and technology and research and chemotherapy has come, but how we really maybe need to also return to the types of conversations and individual patient consideration that you got, that so many women don't get. And, you know, that's the lesson. You should be telling this to students across the country because they need to.
I've always said she's got to be one of the longest living women.
Survivors of triple negative, especially.
Yeah. And he didn't let you die. And he told you to go home. And like I tell my patients, eat good food and get good rest, right? That's the best thing you can do for your body. And it's not to say that chemo doesn't work and that radiation isn't important, because they really are. And when they work really, really well. And they prolong people's lives and give them more time with their family, and they shrink tumors and kill cancer cells. But you got to know when and how to use it. And, you know, circling back to Haley and TNBC Foundation, the beauty of the organization, the reason why I love it is because it gives women a chance to do something with what happened to them, right? Because this thing kind of like happened to you.
Right.
Well, now what do I do with it?
I didn't choose it.
Right. And it's not just telling your story, but now it's like it's advocacy. Now I can talk about policy. I don't just raise money. Now we can impact science. And now there's a vehicle to do a lot. Go ahead, Lori.
No, well, I mean, since I met you, Ricky, it has stuck in my head when you said the first day that we met, that this is the only cancer that does not have a cure. I mean, that's huge and that's major, and that needs to be out there, and people need to know that. And I mean, obviously the medical community needs to, be working on that, but that really blew my mind.
Yeah, that we don't have a drug to prevent recurrence.
Yes.
Everybody else, yeah, we don't have one, and everybody else can take tamoxifen or
Right.
take something for 5 years. We don't have one, and so we have to, know that we're
Our
miracle.
work cut out for us. We do.
Yeah,
And I used to argue. But you did have breast triple negative. I don't understand. They never did radiation. They never did chemo. You never had anything. You
you're a
never
miracle.
had nothing.
You're a miracle. You're a miracle. It wasn't your time. God wanted you to be here to have all these beautiful babies and grandbabies and
Mother had
have all these, and have the superpower of all these women in your family. We needed you. They needed you.
My mother used to say, she believes that the day you're born, you're stamped, your birth date and your death date. And I said, get real, mother, get real. She said, it wasn't your time. And by the way, I've had a brain aneurysm. They couldn't operate in
Palm Springs, we were here, we got
area.
her up to, oh no. Dr. Ma, you need to hear her whole story, because there's nothing we
I
haven't.
can't wait.
We've had a crush injury. We had a Toyota Tundra run over Marcia's foot. No, you have no,
No.
the hip just gave, we fell, had the hip, I mean, we've been through
Colon cancer.
we've seen it all.
And look at her. Look at her.
And it just goes to show you, because if we don't ask these questions and have these conversations, like Marcia, you are literally a walking miracle. You are. And if nobody ever told you, here it is, it's official. You are a walking miracle.
That's a medical diagnosis. Right?
That's it. It's in the textbooks. If you look up walking miracle, there's your picture.
There she is.
Right. You wouldn't know though. How many of us have these amazing stories in our families and we don't know? Right? Because something happened to Nana down there and nobody talked about it. And meanwhile, she's got this incredible reservoir of strength. She's got these stories. She's got a story about the nurse who took care of her and the doctor who said, we're not doing that to you. Like this is a lot of people's story. And it's so important that we get these stories before our time, whatever time we have, before that stamp and that date is up, right? Like we can celebrate these and learn from them.
And document it so people do understand. And there's so much to learn, and there's no stigma. I mean, if anything's
Right.
important, it's us documenting, telling our stories. The good, the bad, and the ugly, it's all so important, and there's nothing to hide. I mean, I understand people's fear when they're going through it, of course, but for us to not share our stories and to not, what one person could learn from each one of us, it's just,
Right.
That's what this that you guys have started is so important. And also, that it affects your community, our community. Why? What's that connection? And I couldn't think of a better community, quite frankly, but I think we're fabulous and it's all good. But what, it's just all of this, and sort of just putting those pieces of the puzzle together and why and how. And we've got to continue this, always.
And no one fights alone. No one should do this alone.
That's
We
right.
need each
Yeah.
other.
It's
That's
universal stories, and it affects, not just one
Yeah.
person and one person's tumor. I always tell my medical students, there's a person attached to that tumor in that chart, and there's not just a person, there's a family, and there's not
there's
just
a
a
whole
family,
life.
there's a community, there's a whole ecosystem, right? Ricky was, as we like to call it, the ecosystem. I have a question for Allison. What comes next for you? You've painted the picture of your mother's story, of her advocacy work, of her legacy. What are you inspired to do? And what do you do with this information? And how are you and your family How are you guys doing? Because this is all really recent too.
It's pretty, yeah. I mean, August, it's crazy to think it's only been about, I mean, it'll be 7 months, March 8th, right? So it's like, I'm still in that phase of like, counting down, like, okay, we made it through this month. But, I think for me and my family, it's about taking this pain and turning it into purpose. And my mom was such an advocate even before her diagnosis. I mean, she's leading me to, find this cure, because I know that's what she wanted. I know it sounds like a big, tall order, but like stranger things have happened. And,
Why not? Aim high. Absolutely.
Right.
Why
And so
not?
like now it's sort of our mission, and I'm lucky enough to, work for my aunt who, has this amazing platform from her amazing career as a fashion stylist turned designer on QVC. And we have this amazing, she has a great following, and it's like, we want to bring awareness and attention, not only to breast cancer, but to the triple negative, because it is so different. And, it was hard too. At the beginning of my mom's diagnosis, and my friends would say, oh, it's not a death sentence. And then it was hard when I had to go back out and say my mom passed. And they're like, people die of breast cancer. Right. And it's like, yeah. And going through that. And it was just, they didn't know, they didn't mean any harm, but it was just like, knife, right? But this is our mission now, and it's powerful. And we've only known each other a short time, but I feel like we have life-sustaining relationships, and it's a sisterhood that we're bonded now by this awful disease. And I do believe that someday we'll all be together celebrating a cure or vaccine or something. I mean, it has to happen.
So I want to just say on a positive note, and something that, I think would really, help so many families. It's like all those stages of, pain that we know. And, I've watched Allison grow as a human being in these 7 months. I mean, I've never seen Allison in so much pain and just sort of lost in those first, weeks, perhaps month or two. But then, she rose and she found people to help her and to understand death, quite frankly, and to understand on a bigger spiritual picture what this life is and meaning of life. And, as a human being in 7 months, I've seen her grow and change and become, a different adult. I mean, of course she was an adult, but we grow, I have always had a spiritual practice or looked for one. Now, I just understand the world. And I think that when these things happen to us, we get to experience something that we can never experience just by living a day-to-day life. So I remember what my father said to me when he came down, and he was the one who told us that my mom had breast cancer. And this has always stuck with me. And he said, I just want you to understand that out of every bad comes a good. And that really resonated and has always stayed with me, because after that initial horrific pain starts to subside, and only time and understanding can bring us that, you do understand, like, the good from this is that we've met you, that Allison is understanding what her mother's purpose was, and that we get to grow as human beings and really be a part of something that's so much bigger than us as individuals. And so, that's coming through the other side of the pain. And we've all been there. And we also know that we're all here and we're all survivors. Just living life for surviving.
Yeah, that's such a great.
Yeah, we learned that in COVID for sure.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. And the mind, the body, and the spirit are connected, and we can we can choose gratitude, which I call it the currency of the universe, right? And even though these life experiences are happening to us, we can give thanks for the growth that we have and the opportunity to impact so many people.
Right.
You know, this is a wonderful way to transform these experiences. And I think perhaps part of the reason why we're all here, right, is to develop this transformative way. Wow, this has been amazing.
It's great. You know what? We didn't really give justice to who Lori is. We should tell, who are you?
Yes.
Tell our audience. Yeah.
Who doesn't know? But yes, we
Lori
should.
Goldstein.
I am somebody who was born in this world knowing that there was a bigger purpose than I could ever imagine. And in doing so, I've been blessed with, I don't know, I can't talk about myself. I'm just somebody who knows that this life is here for all of us to learn and grow from each other. And I've been really blessed.
Yes. You're lucky I let you live.
Finding my journey.
She was incorrigible as a child.
Because I was born in the 70s and I always wanted to know what life meant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Allison, you give the pitch, the sales pitch.
I always like to say, if you don't know Lori Goldstein, just Google her. There's so much. No, but Lori, my aunt, has had an astonishing career, dating 30, maybe a little over 30 years now in the fashion world, and really creating the most iconic looks with the most iconic fashion designers and photographers and covers, editorials. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I mean, she was a fashion stylist for forever, and how lucky was myself and my little sister to like have this aunt in New York City, and she would come to Columbus and she would take us back to school shopping, and we would like, strut into school that first day. Like, that was like, everybody was like, what are they going to wear? And then in 2009, she was, QVC approached her to do a collection, and the rest is history. I mean, she's got one of the top apparel lines at QVC and logo by Lori Goldstein. And and so much has come from this too. And it's sort of like everything with timing in a lot of ways, because going through my mom's treatment, obviously my mom was, her biggest fan and would always be decked out in logo. And through treatment, it was the women would say, oh my gosh, they hug, and just the softness of her clothes. And we started to learn that there's like, with the radiation treatment, just like the touch of the fabric, and they just like, it was incredible. And and we're like,
That was one thing I learned very early on, because I love soft clothes, but what was beautiful was empowering women to be themselves. We've been told, don't wear white after, Labor Day, you can't mix patterns, don't wear colors, you're a pear shape, all these things that I've never. But what was incredible was these fabrications that a lot of women with fibromyalgia, a lot of women with skin issues from radiation, or I don't know from actually what, really were writing me like love letters of gratitude. Like, I haven't been able to wear clothes for years, and I now found something that's just been the incredible thing that, QVC has allowed me this huge platform with women that, whatever it is, have been able to find themselves. And it's interesting that, we're doing this today, because that's been a lot of, besides, thank you for the style. And I was I grew up in the 70s, there's nothing that fits me. And, this has been, a whole, thank you, but really women who spoke up, because a lot of them didn't. but of how this changed their lives because they could get dressed and feel good again and go out and get compliments and feel alive again instead of, just ignored, which we know that happens. So that's been the gift that QVC has given me. And that can
My patients say that your clothes feel like a hug. They do. They say it feels like a hug.
I love that.
And it's so important at a time, especially during COVID, when nobody can hug anybody, and then I hug all my patients. And for a while we had to fist bump and do all sorts of things, but if you can get a hug from your clothes and feel good about yourself, go into your radiation and go into just your daily living and your home Zoom and your homeschooling, and you're wearing all these different hats, but it really is, it's remarkable, and it's a blessing, truly.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. This has been great. You really have given us a pink table talk, and we hope that our viewers can see how important it is, how critical it is to know her story, talk to your mamas and your aunties and your grandmas, and put this stuff on the table.
Put
Yep.
the kitchen table. Put it all on the table.
Pull it on.
You guys are all amazing. I thank you for having us.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for
joining
sharing your
us.
stories. Thank you for your vulnerability. Breasty love.
Yes, breasty love.
We love.